So Shabbat Shalom, everybody. It's good to see so many people here in Shul. I hope that our attendance continues to grow, and I'm thankful for all of you being here. If you'd like this morning, you can look along at the text that I'm going to be referring to. It's in your Chumashim on page 994. It might be a good opportunity for you to look with me at just, 8 or not even maybe 4 verses that I think tell a variety of different stories and includes a number of lessons. So it's 994. We're going to start with verse 26, and move through to verse 29. And as you're finding your way to that location, the Chumash, I'd share with you a theory that I have about society. We are noticing right now in this country a rise in crime. And we can explain a number of the criminal activities from a sociological, an emotional, even a medical standpoint. We can say that there are people who have been put in exigent circumstances that require of them to behave in ways that are criminal, if not only that, but also antisocial. We can explain that in terms of mental illness. We can explain it in terms of societal pressures. We can explain it in terms of the way people are raised. And then there is a percentage, and I have no idea what percentage it is, but there are people who are just mean. There are people who are just mean. For whatever reason, they are that way. For whatever reason, they have become that way. It's hard to explain, but I can't put it in any other ways except to say that there are people who just have a mean streak in them. And we're faced in our lives with circumstances in which we are confronted by those people in our lives. And we have to react in some way. The Jewish tradition has never, ever said, turn the other cheek. That's not Jewish. The Jewish tradition has never said that when somebody wrongs you, it's okay to just let them. And be compassionate and kind and loving and caring and just turn the other cheek. And allow them, if they need to continue to exercise that behavior, to do so. But that love will conquer all. As much as I wish that was true, as much as I wish that we could throw our arms around every individual in our society who acts in a way that is unacceptable and outside the boundaries of our legal system, how great would it be to be able to just throw them so much love that they would transform? I'm not suggesting in any way that that's not a good solution in some circumstances, but it won't always work. We arrive this Shabbat right before Tisha B'Av. And we recognize because of Tisha B'Av that there are people in the world who seek to do us harm. And they may have explanations about the killing of their God. They may have explanations about the concern that we will rise up against them. But the truth is, when the Romans and the Greeks before them destroyed the temple, it wasn't out of a concern that the Jewish people would overtake the Greek and Roman empires. We were never going to be that big and powerful. It was because we had something sacred and they wanted to take it away from us. I wish history were a little more complicated and a little more nuanced, but the truth is, we held out for as long as we possibly could against a Roman Empire that sought our destruction. We worked incredibly hard to make sure that we, as a small Jewish people living in a little enclave in the Middle East, could just enjoy our own religious freedom. But it wasn't to be. So let me show you a couple verses in this week's Parsha. And I would remind you that the book of Deuteronomy is a late addition to the Torah. I would also remind you that it's supposed to be Moses' recollection of events that occurred. It's a way that Moses is trying to reconcile why people behave the way they do. And so we have this extraordinary verse. That Moses wanted to pass through the territory of the king of Heshbon. And so he sends messengers ahead and he says, can you let us just pass through? We won't step foot off of the highway. We won't go left or right. We won't bother you at all. If we eat anything, we promise to pay for it. If we drink anything, we promise to compensate you. And then it goes on. And he asks, can we go? And Melech Heshbon says something remarkable, V'lo ava. He says, no. We're sorry. You cannot go through our land. Moses says, but we're on our way to the promised land. We have no interest in what you have. We're on our way to see our destiny, to live our fate in the Holy Land, the promised land that God promised us. We have no interest in bothering you at all. And then the text says something that we hear, reminiscent of the words of Pharaoh. When the Jewish people wanted to leave and Moses pled with Pharaoh to let him out. It says the following, Melech Heshbon hevirenu bo ki hiksha Adonai Elohecha et rucho v'imetz et levavo leman titu biyadecha kayom hazeh. And Melech Heshbon said, no, you can't go. And then the text says, because God stiffened his heart. Because God hardened his heart in order to show that the Jewish people had the power of God behind them and that God would overcome. And I can't help but think to myself, that sounds a little apologetic. It sounds like this was a man who didn't want us to pass through his land for no good reason. And then as we rewrite the story and we think to ourselves, what could possibly have been going through his mind? We weren't going to do anything to them. We weren't going to take anything from them. And so we say to ourselves, so something must have triggered him. Something must have forced him to behave this way. It must have been God who said to him, don't let them go through, in complete opposition to God's plan for the Jewish people. Truthfully, it makes no sense to me. The Jewish people had gone through the desert experience, triumphant one time after the next. Battle after the next, they win. There's no need any longer to prove to the Jewish people, to Moses, to the inhabitants of the land that surrounds Israel, that the Jewish people will inhabit their destiny. And so Moses tries to explain it. Moses tries his very hardest. He does exactly what we all do all the time. And that is we say, why would they treat me that way? Each and every one of us in our lives at some moment have had somebody who has treated us poorly. And we say to ourselves, what were they thinking? Some of us even do something even worse, in which we say to ourselves, what did I do to encourage that behavior? What did I do to deserve that behavior? And I'm here to tell you today one very simple lesson. Some people are wired differently, and they do horrible and mean things. There are sociopaths who do horrible things. And in the face of those people who cannot live in society, our society says, you cannot live amongst us. That's why we have a system with prisons. There's no question about it. There are people who are incarcerated who ought not be. They should rather receive treatment and help. But I don't believe that every person in the world seeks to do good all the time. So I say to you something very, very simple today. Tisha B'Av is a moment in which we recall a horrible event in our lives. In the history of the Jewish people, we recall this moment. And I can't help but think that at some point in the next couple hundred years, Tisha B'Av will assume, or absorb rather, the Holocaust. Yom HaShoah, I think, will make it into that day. I believe that Yom HaZikaron, which is the day where we recall those who died at the hands of enemies as the state of Israel was being formed and continues to survive, will be absorbed into Tisha B'Av. Because Tisha B'Av will become the day in which we recall that there are people who seek our destruction, who want to do us harm. There's no question that in the Middle East there are people who want to partner with the Jewish people. We see that this year with the Abraham Accords, which is simply an outgrowth of the Camp David Accords, in which we saw Menachem Begin and Anwar Sadat shake hands in a lasting peace with Egypt. You know, Yitzhak Rabin used to remind us, you don't make peace with friends. Sometimes you have to make peace with unsavory enemies. It's an understanding that we in our lives must always seek out partners, but also recognize that there are people who seek our destruction. Some people in our personal lives are mean just for the sake of being mean. And we have to do everything in our power, both to protect ourselves as a nation and protect ourselves as individuals. There will be people in our lives who we call toxic because they are bad for us. They instill in us a sense of poison that eats away at us. There are people in the world who seek the Jewish destruction, who sought the final solution. And we have to do everything in our power to maintain an ability to protect ourselves. Thank God, Israel has one of the greatest military forces in the world. Recognize they have to. Recognize we have to. And we have to do everything in our power to support ongoing efforts for peace, but we also have to continue to stand as American Jews side by side with Israel because we are Israel's greatest ally. And without the support and protection that the United States provides for Israel, Israel would have to fight a lot harder and lose a lot more lives. We are grateful for technology like the Iron Dome. It's sad that we live in a world in which that's required. Jewish people have enemies. We in our own personal lives have challenging people. I pray that we have the strength to continue to defend ourselves and our holy land, but also to protect ourselves as individuals from people who are just mean for the sake of being mean. It's a message that's so incongruous with Shabbat. It's unfortunate that this is a message I bring, but it's been so much on my mind as we inch towards Tisha B'Av and recognize the extraordinary suffering we have endured. The book of Lamentations, which I pray you'll read tonight and tomorrow, is significant because it describes horrific moments in our historical past. It reminds us that we have to work with God, with allies, to make the world a better place. Shabbat Shalom. We continue with Musaf, page 184, the Chatzi Kaddish. Please rise.